Hello, welcome back. I'm Reverend Tomas Garza, and well, we're here on this series of videos near the completion of the workbook for students. And as I've mentioned more than once, deliberately, of course, in the past, it's not the end, is it? These ideas are designed to stay with us. And when we go through, and it will be now less than 2 weeks' time, we'll be through all the way through the 365 ideas in the workbook, which Jesus refers to as lessons. And I know for all of you who have done this workbook before, wherever you are right now, or if you're at lesson 358 with me, or if you're just starting out, I know you've learned a great deal. It's said in many, many spiritual traditions the world over that learning is, in fact, it's unlearning. We're making a pact with ourselves. We're making a pact, an agreement with our brothers and sisters, in other words, every single living thing. We're making a sacred pact every time we forgive. And we come to discover, of course, that who we're making this agreement, this pact with, is really ourself with a capital S, which is who we really are. And along the way, we discover, to the horror and chagrin of the ego, that we have a sacred responsibility to the world, to our brothers and sisters, to everyone. And that is a sacred responsibility to ourself. Capital S. Yeah. It's us. We have a responsibility to ourself to set the ego aside so that we may know what deep down we really want. And that is the peace of God. So in this vein, let's go through lesson 358 here in the workbook for students. No call to God can be unanswered or left unanswered. And of this I can be sure. His answer is the one I really want, all right? No call to God will be left unanswered. And the answer that God gives us is, in truth, the only one we really want. It's the peace of God. The prayer that accompanies lesson 358 is an injunction for us to accept truth just as it is. This is God's answer. And it goes on to say, right at the very end, that self, ego self, with a lowercase s, it is helpful, isn't it, to write these and to read these terms with lowercase and uppercase letters, isn't it? Because there's quite a distinction between the ego self, lowercase s on the one hand, and yourself, capital S on the other. This is the choice that we make every day, every moment of every day. When you choose love, you choose yourself. You make the decision that Jesus made, that he wanted only the peace of God. We've seen throughout this workbook a number of lessons that are focused on that. And in fact, as you know, they start quite early on. in the process. I invite you to go over this idea again and again, because along the path, we all benefit from a restatement, from a recommitment to ourselves and everyone else, same. We all benefit from a reorientation of our minds. It's very important that we ask to know truth just as it is, to allow truth to be just as it is. We do this in calm and tranquility, certain of the outcome. If there's a situation that comes up where you think, okay, well, I don't really know about this, that's all right. We all need to expect some egoic resistance on the spiritual path, don't we? How could it be otherwise? The ego knows that you will eventually leave it behind, stating unequivocally and in no uncertain terms that you do not need it and it does not exist. Yet, while it appears to exist, we have spiritual practice, during which process, whatever that looks like for you, we disidentify with the ego. We leave to the side our false sense of self and allow truth to be just as it is. Incidentally, some of you may be aware of this and some are not, but I want to call your attention to one of the pamphlets that accompanies A Course in Miracles. Your printed version, if you have one, may or may not contain this, depending on the edition, but it's known as the Song of Prayer, which is intended as a companion to this course. And it's very short compared to the text in the workbook and the manual for teachers. It's very short and very sweet. It invites us, as Jesus has also invited us here in the workbook, it invites us to go from specifics to abstraction in prayer, in our communication with our higher self, with the Holy Spirit, Jesus, God, your guide or guides, right? And maybe it's Buddha, maybe you have a human teacher whom you look up to. Whatever that situation looks like for you, let's spend a couple of minutes talking about this. It's germane to lesson 358, and it's, of course, as everything we talk about here, is directly relevant to life itself, to every single situation that you may find yourself engaged in. There's absolutely nothing wrong with asking for specifics in a prayer. An example of this is praying that God will give you a new car. I'm just using that as an example. Is praying specifically that you may lose 15 pounds. Praying specifically that you look hot when you go to the beach this summer. Right? That kind of specificity, absolutely nothing wrong with that. And Jesus invites us to, in fact, go further than that and move from specifics to abstraction. Love is completely abstract. Therefore, God is completely abstract. And we're told what we deep down know in our heart of hearts, that God answers those general prayers. The prayer to allow truth to be just as it is, rather than our specific manipulations, such as, I want to look hot in a bathing suit this summer. I want to lose 15 pounds. I want a new car. What we're driving at here is that I encourage you, Jesus encourages you, we all encourage you to want only the peace of God. This workbook invites you to want only the peace of God. Ask that you may enter into his presence right now. There is no other time, not 15 years from now. I mean, we don't know that we're going to be alive in 15 years. None of us knows that. We may have inclinations and hints, but can you truly guarantee that? No. And on another level, the level of truth itself, we're always alive because God, love, is life. We only appear to die in the sense that the physical body does not last forever. And when we think about all of the aches and pains and the ways that it suffers, we can really truly be glad of that. And it doesn't matter whether you go in for the idea of what people call reincarnation or rebirth or past lives. We have only the present moment. So if that concept of past lives helps you to see that this limited physical body is not all there is, great. If it doesn't help you, you don't have to indulge in it. You don't have to believe it. Use only your current lifetime as a gauge, as a measuring stick. When we ask for the abstract in prayer, or more abstract, such as asking Jesus as he suggests we do, now, if he's not your teacher, ask your teacher, right? That you may set aside all judgments, not just specific judgments of one political party as an abomination and wrong, but all judgments. This includes all labels, all of them, all names, including the one we're given here in the world. Even that identifies or refers to something specific, doesn't it? So we move to the extent that we remember to do it and the extent that you're in fact ready for it, from the specific to the general. A couple of examples, again, are asking your teacher to help you set aside all of your judgments. Asking God to, well, that you may enter into his presence now, that you may accept truth just as it is. Invite your inner teacher to direct your forgiveness without giving specific instruction. We all get quite ridiculous sometimes when we attempt to specify a request. Like, I want a new car, as opposed to an old car. It's dualistic, isn't it? Nothing against a new car. Cindy and I have one. It's just a little over a year old, and it's quite nice. But a new car isn't going to make me completely awakened, nor will it make you completely awakened. Losing 15 pounds is not going to awaken your heart and mind. may help, but it is not the end in and of itself. The more abstract prayer you say, whether it's out loud, written down, in your own mind, the more abstraction, the more your guides can help. And we don't have control over the form of that. The prayer that accompanies lesson 358 alludes to this as well. We don't have control over the form. We can, but we shouldn't tell God what to do. We shouldn't try to direct the result. Ours is to simply call and trust, relax and trust and know that the answer will come immediately. It may not come in a form that we recognize. So an abstract prayer would be to recognize, to hear the answer in whatever form it may take. This may sometimes surprise us. Sometimes we may feel directed to do something or say something that's completely out of our ordinary here in the world. And when we scan our decades of history here on this planet, just in this lifetime alone, we can most likely think of a number of examples of that. So when we finish the workbook, there are plenty of other things, materials, lessons that we can talk about. And I just mentioned this Song of Prayer, the pamphlet that accompanies A Course in Miracles, because I read it recently, and it was what I needed to be reading right at the time. This was only a couple of weeks ago, by the way. It really spoke to me, and I invite you to move at the pace with which you feel comfortable, from specifics to abstraction. This is what the spiritual path is, and in this sense, a prayer is symbolic of this motion. It's symbolic of the journey home, in which we're moving from the concrete, the dualistic, the specific, to the abstract. This is how it appears to us while we're on the path, is that it's a progression, a movement. And deep in our innermost being, we know that we've never lost this piece. It is who we are, and it has remained throughout time safe, despite our wandering. It's our identity, as we've seen here in the Course, capitalized with a capital I. It's ourself, capital S. And the prayer that accompanies lesson 358 concludes with this sentence: "Let me not forget myself is nothing, but myself is all." Self with a lowercase s is nothing. Self, uppercase, capital, is all. It's one with God, because only God is. And we're pointing at what is beyond all words and ideas and concepts, truth, just as it is. Now, I invite you to add this to your practice, a simple prayer request that you may experience and allow truth to be just as it is. It's a beautiful prayer to utter, and I hope that you may do that and do it often. Life is a living, breathing, waking meditation, isn't it? As often as we think of today's idea, as often as we remember to pray, that we leave all of our judgments to the side. As often as we remember it, we return to it. One can very easily use these ideas as an anchor to make your entire life a living, breathing meditation. You don't have to sit in formal contemplative practice if you don't want to. And you can. It's always beautiful and good to help quiet the mind in that setting. But you can effectively, on the go, wherever you are, use these workbook ideas to come back to listen to the Holy Spirit in yourself. The call. Bring your mind back to the call. And in that moment, answer it. I invite you. Thank you so much for joining me here.